The stated reason for the bombing was for the tunnels, to destroy the tunnels. What are your thoughts on the extraordinary continuous bombing that took place all over Gaza, including UN schools? And what are your thoughts about the concept of proportionality as dictated, as laid out by the Geneva Conventions? Just what are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, I mean, you raise a lot of good points, but also one, Paul, is the timeline, or what you might call mission creep, because as I go back with the timeline, the original mission of the Israeli mission was to bring an end to the rocket attacks. And then once they got in there, then it became the tunnels. And so the tunnels, my understanding was destroying tunnels was not the original goal of the Israeli military. And if that's the case, I don't know. I own a house, I have nice property around it, and if I find a molehill coming up, I'm not going to be digging back into the woods to find where the molehill begins. I could destroy the tunnels on the Israeli side of the border, so you wonder what's the point of doing that? I mean, obviously they had a very sophisticated network of tunnels that existed there. So I mean, in response to that question, and you're absolutely right. I mean, this issue has been raised, and I've read articles written by political theorists and others in human rights journals about, what as you raised is the question of proportionality. I mean, even a Robert McNamara, if you ever saw his film that was done on him, we raised this as a point looking at the U.S. bombing campaign during World War II against Japanese cities, and that basically admitting that if the United States lost the war, he as well as General LeMay and American political leaders would have been tried as war criminals. And of course, this is something Israel fears, and something again that the Palestinian Authority is sort of holding over Israel's head about possibly bringing, and they've been saying this for 2 years now, going back to 2012, is bringing Israel before the International Criminal Court about these issues. So yeah, I mean, there's that problem of proportionality. There's no doubt that Hamas had mortar sites that were located in civilian areas. But it's not to excuse it. But that's the nature of guerrilla warfare. You're not going to have Hamas going out, having an army sitting out in the Kuwaiti desert like Iraq did that we could just destroy, that's hiding amongst the population. Go back and look at guerrilla struggles that have been waged through the years from Vietnam, Algeria, and so on. So, I mean, that's the problem. And again, it's something I'll talk about next week when we talk about the response to dealing with ISIL in Syria and Iraq. Can you simply do that by a bombing campaign? Or doing that, are you going to create more enemies as you're killing more and more civilians? I mean, think of what Israel did. I mean, we're sort of very careful, or at least say we are, in terms of quote unquote surgical strikes to avoid civilian casualties. How do you escape? And of course, and again, I think it's not anything hidden. My disdain for Netanyahu, because I believe he destroyed the peace process when he was prime minister back in 1996. Going back that far, I wrote an op-ed piece about that 18 years ago, and then coming to the United Nations and talking about Israel having the most moral, ethical military in the world. I mean, bringing up the purity of arms, which has been, I mean, that got blown out the window in 1982 with the invasion of Lebanon and what went on there. So, it's one thing to sort of say, I don't know. But I mean, you had U.S. military people who were in there, who were traveling with Secretary of State Kerry, who were making comments to the fact that, this was overkill with what Israel was doing, with the amount of artillery that it had brought in. And again, we've read about UN sites and others that were being hit by Israel.
And the fact that there's no place you can go in Gaza where there aren't civilians, because the place is completely
Well, you can't.
overpopulated.
Yeah.
There's no place you can go where there aren't any people.